You know what's worse than betrayal? Seeing it walk through the door in diamonds and call you poor thing. 3 years ago, my sister stole my fiancé. We had a wedding date, guest list, the whole dream lined up. Today, at our father's funeral, she arrived on his arm like she won a prize. "Still alone?" she purred, the diamonds on her wrist catching the church lights. But I wasn't alone. And when I said, "Meet my husband," her smirk disappeared. "Wait until you hear who he is. Like, subscribe and stay with me." It was 3 years ago, in a small coastal town outside Savannah. The kind of place where everyone knew your dog's name but not your heartbreak. I remember the way Alex held my hand under the oaks in Callahan Park. His voice was warm, steady. Late July, that's when we should do it. The ocean breeze, the lights, you in white. I laughed. I believed every word. We had a villa picked out for the reception, beach views, fireflies, the smell of salt and champagne in the air. That night, I wrote our names in my journal. Julia and Alex. Forever starts July 23rd. We were in sync, same pace, same dream. A life of morning coffee, shared projects, maybe kids one day. I knew his favorite vinyl. He knew how I took my tea, that kind of love. But in the quiet edges of our story, my sister Lindsay watched. She always watched. She was 4 years older, poised like a magazine spread. People called her elegant. I knew better. Growing up, she'd pick my clothes before I did, criticize them, then copy them. She was always 2 steps behind, but she wanted to be first. When Alex and I got engaged, she smiled too quickly. "Finally," she said, like she'd been waiting to strike it off a checklist. I thought nothing of it. She had her own life in the city. A high-end marketing job, rooftop drinks, designer shoes I couldn't pronounce. Then she started showing up more. Stopping by Alex's office with lattes. "Was in the area," she said too often. Lingering after family dinners, asking him about his brilliant little startup. She played it smooth, subtle. Told him I was too naive, not used to his world, that I wasn't ready for what he was building. And maybe, just maybe, he started to believe her. I didn't notice the change at first. The late texts, the canceled plans, the way he smiled less when I walked into the room. But one morning, he was gone. No note, no ring, no goodbye. I called, messaged, drove to his place. Nothing. Silence. It was like our engagement vanished into air. And then I saw them. Downtown. A Thursday afternoon. They were holding hands in the open like I'd never existed. Laughing. Like I hadn't made a home in his chest for the past 4 years. Alex saw me. His laughter died. Lindsay just gripped his arm tighter and smiled. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That look said, "He's mine now. You lost." Lindsay's betrayal didn't land like a single strike. It came in waves, the silence, the whispers behind my back, the pitiful glances at the grocery store when word got around. "Julia's fiancé ran off with her sister," they said. I stopped going out. Couldn't walk 2 blocks without feeling like a rumor. The worst part? I kept looking for signs I missed. The way she asked about him too much. The compliments that sounded more like rehearsed lines. How could I have let her that close? We shared a childhood, a room, a father. I had forgiven her before for smaller things, jealousy, manipulation, even lies. But this was war disguised as family. And Alex? He didn't call, didn't explain, not a word. His silence told me everything. He chose her, knowingly, deliberately. People said time heals, but time, in those days, felt like a dull knife. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The wedding dress hung in my closet like a ghost. Then came the wedding announcement. A glossy invitation sent to our father's house, addressed to Mr. and Miss Harper, their names in gold cursive. Lindsay Monroe and Alexander Fields. Private ceremony, Caribbean resort. A photo of them smiling on the beach. I wanted to burn it. Instead, I folded it into a drawer I never opened again. My father didn't understand. Blood is blood, he told me. You're still sisters. But Lindsay had burned that bridge, and I stood on the ashes, alone. That fall, I left, packed 2 suitcases, closed the lease on my apartment, and moved. No goodbye party, no announcement, just gone. I landed in Brookhaven, a smaller city tucked between lakes and long pine valleys, the kind of place where no one knew my face, my name, or what I'd lost. I took a job as a nurse at the regional hospital. Long hours, endless shifts. Perfect. Work was something I could control. Patients didn't ask about failed engagements. They just needed care. And I had plenty of that left in me, even if I couldn't give it to myself. In those first 6 months, I barely looked up. I volunteered for extra hours, took overnight shifts no one wanted, read medical journals during lunch breaks. My body was exhausted, but my mind was calmer. Every small thank you from a patient was a stitch over the tear Lindsay left behind. And then I met Dr. Richard Lane. He was older, head of oncology, sharp mind, soft voice, the kind of man who didn't have to prove anything. Everyone respected him. But what drew me in was how he noticed things. Once, he found me asleep at the nurse's desk after a 14-hour shift. He didn't scold me, just quietly placed a blanket over my shoulders and left a cup of tea beside me. No words, just care. We didn't start fast. He was careful. I was terrified. But slowly, carefully, like a sunrise, something began to shift. He asked about my life, not to fix it, but to understand it. And for the first time in a year, I told someone the truth. About Alex, about Lindsay, about the crater they left in me. Richard listened, fully, without judgment. And when I cried, he just held my hand. That winter, he invited me to a medical conference. We walked through snow-covered streets in Chicago, sipping coffee, debating patient care models. It didn't feel like romance. It felt like trust. By the time spring arrived, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. And when he touched my hand at the hospital fundraiser that April, I didn't pull away. Brookhaven bloomed in April. The trees along Holloway Street unfurled their leaves like forgiveness. And for the first time since the betrayal, I didn't feel like a broken version of myself. I was just Julia again. Richard and I started seeing each other outside of conferences, meetings, and hospital walls. Sunday mornings at the local farmers market. Evenings spent walking by Lake Verity, where we'd watch the light sink behind the hills. His world was quiet, steady, grounded. A far cry from the whirlwind I'd once mistaken for love. He wasn't flashy. He didn't surprise me with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Instead, he remembered how I liked my tea. He brought me books he thought I'd love. And he always made space for silence, never rushing to fill it, never afraid of it. It was during one of those silences that he said simply, "I like who I am when I'm with you." I didn't respond. Not then. But I thought about it for days. I liked who I was around him too. At the hospital, I began to grow. My supervisors noticed. They offered me a chance to begin advanced training in oncology. A full scholarship sponsored by the Lane Foundation, Richard's own institute. I almost refused. I didn't want his name to carry me. But he saw the hesitation in my eyes and said, "Take it. Not because of me, because you've earned it." And I had. By then, I'd worked 2 years without missing a shift. Handled more patients than anyone on my floor. I had earned it, with exhaustion, sweat, and more heart than I ever thought I had left. I took the offer, and with it, my world expanded again. More conferences, more research, more purpose. The pain didn't vanish, it never fully does. But it stopped defining me. When Richard introduced me as my colleague, I smiled. When he later introduced me as my partner, I didn't flinch. We built something, not fast, not loud, but real. He proposed a year later, not with a ring at sunset, not on one knee, but at our kitchen table, over takeout, his glasses slipping down his nose. "I've spent years building hospitals, programs, systems," he said, "but Julia, I want to build a life with you." There was no hesitation, no Alex in the back of my mind, no shadow of Lindsay, only me, only him. I said yes. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like a beginning, not a reaction. Our wedding was small. 12 people, a chapel surrounded by wildflowers, and no press, no spectacle. Just the people who mattered, and the vows we whispered like promises we'd already begun to keep. We moved into a house near Lake Verity, not big, not flashy, but warm. Books lined the shelves, music filled the rooms, and the air always smelled like roasted coffee beans and fresh eucalyptus from the garden. I didn't think about Lindsay, not really. She was part of a story I no longer reread. Until one rainy morning in November, the phone rang. My father had passed, sudden, a heart attack. And just like that, the past called me home. The town hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks, same faded brick buildings. But everything looked smaller now, like a place I'd outgrown without even noticing. We drove in silence. Richard's hand rested on my knee as I stared out the window, watching the past roll by. The diner where Alex used to wait for me after work. The bookstore where Lindsay and I shared whispered teenage secrets. Ghosts everywhere. I hadn't been back in almost 3 years, not since the day I saw them on that street, her hand in his like it belonged there. That was the day I stopped believing in forever, the day I stopped calling this place home. But I had come back. For him. For the man who used to read me poetry after dinner. Who carried tissues in his coat for just in case. Who never picked sides, even when he should have. The church was modest, just like he would have wanted. Stained glass filtering soft light. Rows of familiar faces I barely recognized. The air smelled like lilies and old wood and something heavier. Memory. We arrived early. Richard held my hand as we entered. He didn't say much, he never did in moments like this, but his presence grounded me. I wore a simple black dress, no heels, no makeup. Grief doesn't care how you look. People turned as we passed, some whispered. Others gave small, polite nods. I kept walking until I reached the front pew. I sat, hands folded, the silence around me deep and strange. Then I heard them. Heels, deliberate, sharp, announcing themselves before the voice ever had to. "Still alone?" I turned. Lindsay stood at the end of the aisle like a stage actress waiting for applause. Her black coat was perfectly tailored, cinched at the waist. Diamonds glittered at her throat and on her wrist, catching the sunlight like they had something to prove. Her hand rested on Alex's arm. He looked thinner, tired. His smile wasn't there. I stood slowly, met her gaze. "I'm surprised you came," she said, voice honeyed with venom. She didn't hug me. She didn't even offer condolences, just that smirk. Alex said nothing, didn't meet my eyes. "I see you haven't changed," she continued. "Still in your little black dresses, still playing the quiet girl." She leaned in. "Meanwhile, I have everything you ever wanted." Her smile widened. "Alex, success, a real life." I should have felt something, anger, sadness, shame. But I didn't, because at that moment I saw her clearly, really saw her. All the sharpness in her tone was fear in disguise. All the diamonds in the world couldn't hide the cracks in her mask. I took a slow breath and smiled. "Lindsay," I said calmly, "meet my husband." Her face faltered, just for a second. Then Richard stepped forward. Tailored gray suit, wedding band shining soft under the light. His hand found mine. And just like that, everything shifted. The room hushed. Someone whispered, "Is that Richard Lane?" Someone else sat up straighter. Lindsay blinked, once, twice. Her eyes moved to Alex, back to Richard, then to me. Silence thickened. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like the girl who'd been left behind. Richard's presence filled the church without effort. He didn't raise his voice, didn't flaunt anything. He just existed with quiet certainty, and that was enough. Alex extended his hand. "My condolences," he said, voice low. Richard shook it. "Your father-in-law was a good man," he said evenly. No edge, no performance, just truth. That made it sting more. I watched Alex's jaw tighten. His eyes flicked down, not at the handshake, but at the ring on my finger. Lindsay's grip on his arm wavered. Her fingers slipped slightly, just enough for me to notice. And her face, God, her face. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And I had it. We took our seats again. The ceremony began. Soft organ music, readings from Psalms, words about forgiveness, about kindness, about love that endures even when we're gone. I listened, but more than that, I breathed. When it ended, I approached the casket, rested my hand gently on the polished wood. "Thank you," I whispered, "for always loving me, even when I didn't know how to love myself." I placed a copy of his favorite poem, Yeats, inside the flowers, then stepped back. People filtered out. Small talk, condolences, tired hugs, and then I saw her. Lindsay stood near the exit, her coat still buttoned, clutch tight in hand. No longer a performance, no more posturing, just her. I walked up, Richard behind me. "I'm sorry it turned out like this," I said. My voice wasn't sharp, it was soft. She didn't respond, didn't look at me. "I don't hate you," I added. Her head snapped slightly in my direction. "I used to, but I don't anymore." I meant it. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Lindsay." Her eyes filled, but she blinked too fast to let anything fall. She didn't say thank you, didn't apologize, but she nodded. And that was something. I turned to Alex. He looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Take care of yourself," I said. He met my gaze, longer this time. Then, "I should have been better to you." A pause. "I know," I said. Then I walked away. Outside, the air was cold and clear. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk like gold confetti from a forgotten celebration. Richard pulled me close. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm better than okay." We drove to the airport in silence. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was light. On the flight back to Brookhaven, I watched the clouds drift below us. Let myself close that chapter for good. Lindsay and Alex divorced a year later. His business collapsed. She left the city. I don't know where they are now. I hope they're healing. But I don't need to know. Because I have Richard, because I have work that matters, because I forgave. And more importantly, I lived. One evening, months later, I stood on our balcony, coffee in hand. The sky burned orange and lavender. Richard stepped beside me. No words, just presence. And I thought, maybe I didn't get the wedding I imagined, but I got the life I was meant for. And that's the kind of love no one can steal.